All right, well, good morning and welcome once again. My name is Jason Martinez and you are on the Summit Alliance Advantage Tuesday training. We're going to be talking about underwriting today and directing your clients. Client placement, that's can be very, very important when it comes to getting paid in this business, and building your book of business, working with your clients, getting your clients covered, and getting that just what I call security blanket in your client's hand, in the form of a policy. In the form of coverage. When you take the time to go out, because we get into this business, we got to get licensed. We, have to go through that whole process. And then once we're licensed, we have to, be trained in the market and the products that we're working with. We have to learn how to direct our clients. And then once we learn how, to direct our clients, identify client needs, identify, health challenges and things to that effect, you have to really, you got to get in front of the clients, right? So you go through all this process of getting to your client and getting them to the point to where they want to do an application. It's like, okay, you know what? This is my need. This is going to take care of it. This fits in my monthly budget. So yes, let's do the application. And then, some agents, you have agent A who, takes their time, asks the right questions, maybe pulls out additional forms that are needed based on the medical challenges. And I'll go into some of that here shortly. But this person is taking just the extra 10, maybe 15, maybe even 20 minutes to write down the extra medications, to write down, all the medical challenges, to ask all the questions. And when they send that business into the carrier, that application is going to stay in what we call jet issue status. They're going to look at this. They're going to check the MIB. They're going to check the Intel check or the script check, which is a list of all the prescriptions they're taking. And from this information, they're going to be able to make a decision. And, if they see that all this checks out with the information on the application that Agent A has thoroughly completed, they're going to be able to make what, the picture's been painted for the underwriter. They're going to be able to make a decision. They're well informed. They're not wondering, okay, well, this person has high blood pressure. Well, is it under control? What was their last reading? What medications are they taking? Is their doctor constantly changing medications to get it under control? And again, my point to that is the agent has all of this information for the underwriter, and the underwriter is able to make a quick decision, as opposed to an agent who, I want to get the application done as soon as I can, just get yes or no real quick, flies through the application, does not ask, what was the last high blood pressure reading or what medications are you currently taking, basically fails to spend the extra 10 to 15 to 20 minutes to get the extra detail. And because of that, quite a few things can happen. Number one, it can be declined because the underwriter does not have enough information. And their underwriters more than likely will err on the side of caution. They'll decline an application before they'll approve it. So if they don't have enough information, and it could just be, the difference of getting a yes or a no. So again, that extra time with your client is very important. And kind of jumping right into it a little bit, understanding underwriting, understanding non-medical versus fully underwritten. Real quick on that, non-medical, again, when a client applies for a non-medical life policy, life coverage, that can come in many forms: through final expense, that's a life policy, whole life policy; through mortgage protection, that's basically a term life policy in most cases. Sometimes we'll utilize the IUL with the living benefits. And then they have some other products that, that we could work with. And, again, in understanding the underwriting, these products that we've identified are non-medical, and that means there's no medical exam that's required. There's no blood, no urine. None of this information, has to be gathered from the client, just simply asking a few medical questions. And again, as I mentioned earlier, check that with the medical history and any prescriptions that they've been taking, and they'll be able to make a decision. Versus fully underwritten, where again, the client is applied for the life coverage, and they have to send out an examiner to draw blood, to take urine, to check heart rate, basically do a minor exam on the client for them to qualify for the medical coverage. And many of you know we're real big on non-medical policies. We want to get our client covered without the scrutiny of a medical exam. Me personally, I've been in a situation where I've had a client was in, totally great health, gentleman just over 40 years old, and you know, he wanted to get the best rate possible. So he was, you know, ready to take an exam. He had looked at some rates with preferred ratings. You know, if I can get a preferred rating, I'm going to get a really great rate on my coverage. Well, unfortunately, that's the route he wanted to take. I tried to offer him the safety net of the non-medical policy. Look, let's get a non-medical policy in place first. You know, that way, if you are declined, at least you have this coverage, and at least no one can take it away from you. But he still wanted to apply. He felt confident in his health. So we applied fully underwritten for the coverage, gave blood, gave urine, did the minor medical exam. And then from that, unfortunately, he found out that he had hepatitis. Totally healthy, no signs, basically uninsurable at that point with those types of products. And so where we could have gotten him covered with the non-medical policy because he had no history, he had no medications, and he was eligible for the non-medical product, whereas the underwritten product, you know, again, they went and did an exam and uncovered things that he did not know about. Another example, I had a client, she had small veins, and the examiner was not prepared. Apparently there's a special type of needle that's used for smaller veins. And unfortunately, the examiner wasn't prepared. She kept trying to draw the blood with the needles that were oversized. And then she went to check her heart rate, and my client's heart rate is elevated because of trying to draw the blood. And so here on her record, because of an exam, it shows that she had elevated heart rate that's either not diagnosed or not controlled because she's not taking medication for it. And, you know, so I had to fight through that. I had to arm wrestle with the carrier and get the examiners. And another 60 days later, they allowed me to have her do another exam. And fortunately, you know, we made sure the examiner was prepared and things to that effect. But, you know, a lesson learned. You know, and again, this lady was in great health. So she just had the small vein issue. So, you know, little things can happen. You want to keep your clients protected. And it's important when you're sitting down with your clients that you get that coverage in place. And if you can get it in place without a medical exam, that's you know, you're benefiting the client, you're benefiting, you know, yourself, of course, because you're not having to wait 30, 45, 60 days for the policy to be issued and you know, business to get paid. And so, you know, again, understanding the difference between non-medical and fully underwritten and the steps, you know, that it takes to get the clients covered with each policy, you know, that's very important. You know, get carrier underwriting guides. Now, you'll notice it says for your markets of focus. You know, for instance, if you come in and you like the mortgage protection market, that's the market that you're primarily going to focus on, then make sure that you get the product guides for the products that we use for mortgage protection. You know, like for instance, you know, America's HMS or the Royal Neighbors Rural Advantage Term, or I'm sorry, that's what they used to call it, the Jet Term with Royal Neighbors. Great product, non-medical up to $500,000. Then we also have the Trendsetter with Transamerica with living benefits. You know, again, another great non-medical product. It's non-medical up to $249,000. So, but my point to that is make sure you get the product guide that corresponds with the product that you're going to be using in the market. So if it's the Jet Term with Royal Neighbors, you want to get that product guide. It's going to give you the details of the product. And I'll briefly go into, you know, what some of those details can be here shortly. But again, that's going to allow you to understand the product in detail as far as qualifying the client. You know, we've gone into some of that, and if you view some of the trainings that we have, you know, like America's HMS, I've gone into some of that. What's good about the non-medical products is really the questions will help guide you through the application as far as what they're going to qualify for, along with the product guide, especially for your mortgage protection market, your non-medical markets where you're getting your clients covered with more than just a final expense policy. So again, you're going to run into cases out there. You're going to run into medical challenges, and you're going to need, you know, to understand how to direct them. A good way to do that is know how to do a risk assessment. A risk assessment is something simple that can be done by simply calling the carrier, asking to talk to the underwriter, giving them the information on the client, you know, basic information as far as height and weight, medical condition, if medication, you know, as much detailed information as you can about the client, and they're going to let you know, yes, this client will qualify. No, they will not qualify. You need to potentially try to apply for this, or they may qualify for this, but it could potentially be rated. Basically, you're going to get more detail. You're going to get more understanding on how to direct your client. The underwriters are great at the carriers that we work with, that we partner with. They're going to help, give you the information that you need to direct your clients accordingly. Again, it's very important that you, this is going to help with a few things. Carriers watch your numbers when you submit them, business. Now, if you submit business that, it's bad business, what you call, you're not checking your underwriting guides, you're submitting an application on a client that just had a heart attack a year ago, and in the underwriting guide, it clearly states that it must be over 2 years or it must be over 5 years for this particular condition, but yet, you're not paying attention to that, and you're submitting the business. You get, issue rates. They keep up with your issue percentages. They keep up with your persistency rates. Your issue percentages is basically the percentage of business that issues that you submit to them. If you submit them 10 applications and, only half of them submit, well, you're at a 50% issue rate. You want to make sure you should be over 80% all the time. Your persistency should be over 80%. That's the business that stays on the books. Again, these carriers pay attention to these numbers, and if your persistency is not staying up there, if you're submitting a bunch of bad business, if your numbers get too low, they can terminate your contract for bad business. So, again, you have to be on the really bad end of that. But for the most part, as long as you're paying attention to your business, as long as you're utilizing your product guides, and you're just, directing your clients accordingly, utilizing the underwriters at the carriers, talking to them, getting risk assessments, all of this will make for a smooth process in getting your clients covered very easily, as opposed to submitting, under the wrong product, getting a decision from the carrier as far as a decline, and then having to go back to your client, explain to them why they were declined, and then have to direct them somewhere else. If you can do that from the start and direct your clients accordingly, again, you avoid the decline, you get that approval, you get that policy in your hand. Another thing you want to make sure and do, utilize the supplemental forms for medical conditions. Now, a lot of applications are starting to include the additional questions and the additional supplemental forms. But basically what we mean by this, if you have a client that, let's say, answers yes to the diabetes question, well, you need to ask additional information. Their last A1C reading, their last blood sugar reading, the current medications they're taking. And all of these questions are on what they call supplemental forms. And most carriers have them. So, again, this kind of goes hand in hand with getting the underwriting guide for your market. If you're using the Jet Term with Royal Neighbors, you want to get the Jet Term underwriting guide, and you also want to get any forms that would go with that. Now, the thing about the Jet Term is that's submitted through phone or through e-app, so there are no forms that are required for that. So, again, you want to know your products. You want to know, that you have all of the forms that are required to submit to the carrier. For instance, the HMS with Americo. Now, they've done something pretty neat. They actually include the supplemental forms in the application. So if you get a yes answer to diabetes, it actually has the additional questions to ask your client. And all of this is so we can basically paint a picture for the underwriter, give them all the information that they need to make a decision. Also, call carriers to follow up on pending. This is another thing that if you submit your business and for some reason it hasn't gone through issue paid status, in a matter of days, then more than likely something's holding it up. Now, pending business could be a number of things. It could be because maybe a form didn't go through when it was submitted. Again, if you're submitting it through the home office here, a lot of those mistakes are avoided because we're going to go over that. We're going to put a second set of eyes on the application to make sure that the premium matches the age, to make sure that all the forms are included, and just to make sure that it's going to stay in what we call jet issue status. So if you're following up on the back office of the carrier website and you see that you have pending business, you simply go to the pending requirement, you fulfill that requirement, and next thing you know, it's taken care of. And again, the fortune's in the follow-up. A lot of agents will submit business and not follow up on that business, and it stays pending with the carrier for weeks, months sometimes, and it's not issued until it's addressed. So again, follow up with your business. Kind of as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to take the time to get licensed and get your clients and go through that process of doing an application if you're not going to follow through with it. So definitely follow up with that. And, you know, submit new business properly. This just goes hand in hand with everything that I've been talking about, because you want to direct your clients accordingly. You want to submit your business, again, through our office. That way we can make sure everything is in good order. You know, that's going to help you account for your production, your promotions, and help keep, you know, again, that business in jet issue status. When I talk about non-medical versus fully underwritten, you know, as the agent in non-medical, we are the field underwriters. Again, I talk about painting the picture for the underwriters. As agents, we're the ones that see the client. So, you know, we're the ones that communicate with the client if you're doing it over the phone or through e-app. So also understand that non-medical does not mean guaranteed issue. A lot of agents will get that confused. It simply means there's no medical exam required. So as I said, our job is to gather enough information for the underwriter to make that decision. So, you know, we want to get that complete story, you know, the diagnosis, the result. Is it resolved? What type of treatment? Is there any additional treatment needed? Again, all of these things are going to help you get your application approved, get your client that policy that they were looking for. Opportunity for the client to obtain coverage without the scrutiny of the exam. We talked about that. You know, supplemental forms are critical for non-medical applications. You know, I talked about that as well. You know, again, I can't stress that enough. Those supplemental forms are going to help you ask those questions that you may not think of. You know, underwriters become familiar with the agent's underwriting habits. Again, I mentioned this earlier. This can, you know, really affect you because one thing that you need to keep in mind, insurance carriers in most cases assign an underwriter is assigned to your business. The same underwriter is going to see your business 90% of the time or more. So every time you submit an application to the carrier, it's either going to be, oh God, here's this agent again, or, oh great, this guy always has their business in good order. So which agent do you want to be, you know? And so just keep that in mind. So underwriters become familiar with your underwriting habits. Fully underwritten require blood work, urine samples, physical exams. One of the things that I do if I get a fully underwritten case, make sure and schedule the exam. Yeah, you know, a lot of times, like Royal Neighbors, if you utilize their fully underwritten option, they actually give you the option to have them order it, or you can order it. Try to order your own exams. Try to become familiar. If you happen to be in the DFW area, we do have a local examiner that we can use. We like to use the same one because I like to know who's going out to my client's home, you know, especially after the experience that I had with the one examiner and the high blood pressure. But again, I want to know that you know, they're just as friendly as I was with the client. A lot of times the examiners, you know, they don't care. They're just out there. They're not friendly, and in most cases, unfortunately. So, you know, it's good to kind of know the person. So if you can develop that relationship with an examiner, you know, one of the things that I did to find our examiner is one of our clients told us the great experience that they had with the examiner, and I asked her for a number, and I called her. And I thanked her for her service, and I asked her if I could contact her directly, and she said that would be fine. So that's what I started doing. So that's one little tip there that you can do. So find you a local examiner for those of you that are out of state. Also, you can utilize these exam companies, Exam One, Portamedic, or EMSI. Again, you know, as the examiner goes out, you know, ask the client, what was your experience like? You know, so if you don't know someone or if you don't have a local examiner, you can find one pretty easily. It is a lengthy underwriting process, so you need to continue to follow up. You want to follow up with the carrier. You know, again, one of the things that I do, and this is the next bullet point, if the carrier orders an APS, that's an attending physician statement, I follow up with the doctor that it's ordered from. And I'll call the doctor just as friendly as can be, and I'll ask them, you know, can I speak with the person that's in charge of the record keeping, you know, for doctors? And you know, normally it's the person, the receptionist at the desk, and I'll ask them, okay, well, we've just recently submitted a request for some medical records for one of your patients, and I'll give them the name. And if you don't mind, we kind of in a time crunch here, we're trying to get this client's coverage to prove right away. And it would really help us if you could get these medical records, if you could help expedite this order. So just be as friendly as you could be. And that's just another little tip that I do to help expedite my fully underwritten business. Because we have the HIPAA form, we can contact, they've even asked, well, we can't release that information, sir. Well, you're going to receive the request directly from the carrier. I can fax you over the HIPAA form if you like, because we have a copy of the client's HIPAA form. And, in most cases, they'll take care of it. Okay, great, I'll take care of that. And, so again, that's just another little tip to help expedite your fully underwritten business. And, also it gives your client the opportunity to get a preferred rating. Remember my example earlier of the gentleman that was healthy? He thought he was going to get a preferred rating based on his previous health. Unknowingly, the hepatitis was discovered. But again, this is, just a way to help expedite that business, because fully underwritten takes long enough as it is. And so if you do run into that case, here are some little tips that can help, get you through that a little bit more quickly. This is just an example of some of the information that you'll find in the underwriting guides. It's going to tell you the medical condition, or it's going to, give you some examples like cholesterol levels. Super preferred, it may not exceed 220. Preferred may not exceed 240. For standard or non-tobacco, between 241 and 299 is fine. So, pretty lenient there on cholesterol levels. And this just happens to be the jet term with Royal Neighbors. But again, this is just an example of the information that you'll find. A lot of agents, if I've talked to them about this, and they don't have a clue what I'm talking about. They never even open up a product guide, an underwriting guide. So just a little fair warning there. It's a good idea to go ahead and take a look at this. Again, you don't want to be in a situation where you're sitting down with your client and, let's say your client's, 5'10", but yet they weigh 250 pounds. Well, they're outside of the height and weight guideline on that, but yet you submitted the application. Again, that the underwriter sees that you got another decline that affects your issue rate. And, that just shows that you didn't take the extra 2 minutes that it would have taken to check your height and weight guidelines. And again, we have products to meet those. If we have someone that's outside of these height and weight guidelines, then we can turn to another carrier. We can do a risk assessment. My client weighs this much. Or you can call Royal Neighbors and say, hey, my client is outside your height and weight guidelines, but they're in good health. What can we do? And they'll give you a risk assessment. Well, we'll have to submit them fully underwritten, and they could potentially be rated this based on their height and weight. So again, there's still ways to get them covered, but at the same time, you need to know kind of how to work through that and direct your client accordingly. So again, just a little example. Driving history, aviation, stuff like that comes up when you're, having a client apply for disability or accidental coverage. One of the things that I learned, if a client applies for accidental, they're all more than likely going to pull an MVR, motor vehicle report, because they want to know if they have crazy driving habits. Again, they're more susceptible to accidents or disability or things like that. So, just a good way to understand how to gather the information, things to look for. This is just some more examples of some of the medical conditions that you would run into. Cancer. Notice if your client has had any history of cancer, an APS is always required. So again, if you're sitting down with the client, and this is, for the jet term, not all carriers will always require an APS for history of cancer, but the jet term does. So I know that if my client tells me, well, yeah, I did have cancer, 10 years ago, what have you, I'm going to try to get that doctor's information and let them know, okay, they're going to be contacting your doctor, and, we're still they're required to hold on to that for a certain amount of years. Normally it's only 7 years or so. But either way, the good thing is I know, what I need to ask about that. I know based on what type of cancer, if they would qualify. You can see, the skin cancer, things like that, type and length of treatment, surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, and that, notice it's under the 2 expedite applications. I'm not saying that it's a decline. It's just, look, if you get this information, this additional information, and again, there's cancer supplemental forms. So you can utilize that form, and it has all of those questions broken down. So again, just being familiar with how to underwrite your clients. Because again, as an agent, working with non-medical products, we are field underwriters. Same thing with diabetes. One of the biggest things to note, if you have a client with diabetes, applicants' last A1C result, that hemoglobin test, I believe it's what it's called, but the A1C reading, that's very important for underwriters to know in most cases. A lot of times, agents will neglect to get that, and, they'll always ask. They'll come back. The application will be in pending status because they want to know the last A1C reading. And that's a simple, in most clients who are proactive in their health care that have been diagnosed with diabetes, they're pretty familiar with their numbers, so they know what their last A1C is. And if they don't, they can call their doctor and they can get it, or they can look at their last, medical report. So again, you can look up a medical condition and you can see what information that you need to gather on that, or you can see if the client would potentially qualify or be declined on that. Again, these underwriting guides, this is just an example, how helpful they can be in directing your client and qualifying your client for the right product. Again, this is just some additional information. Another thing, and I actually need to correct myself, under children, all siblings should have the same total coverage amount. Face amount is limited to half of the parent's total coverage. I was under the impression it was a third, but it is only a half. So if you're applying for $100,000 for the child, the parent needs to at least have $200,000. So that's just one little note there. Bankruptcy information, non-working spouse, business coverage. Again, all types of information in the underwriting guide to, again, direct you accordingly for whatever situation that you run into. This is a prescription indicator. Now, this is, as you can see, for the simplified issue. This you'll normally find for your simplified issue products like final expense and mortgage protection. But this is going to tell you if a prescription that they're taking is potentially an automatic decline or not. So, you can always reference this. If you have someone that's taking their medication for a serious condition, you can take a look at this and see if that would potentially be a decline, or again, what direction you can take, or if it needs to be 2 years or longer. This is just the extended version of that. So again, just kind of understanding underwriting, just a quick recap. We know, the difference between non-medical and fully underwritten now, hopefully. Again, we want to, in most cases, get the client covered without the scrutiny of a medical exam. Again, it's just in the best interest of your client. It's in the best interest of the agent. Of course, I've mentioned get the carrier underwriting guides, knowing how to do a risk assessment, contact and developing that relationship with the underwriter. A lot of times when you check your pending business, you can see who the underwriter is that's assigned to your business. You can call the carrier even if you have a question, or you can send them an email personally, and some carrier websites give you that ability, like Transamerica, Agent Net Info. You can communicate directly with the underwriter, and it's best to do that with email with them. America, you can call them. Rural Neighbors, you can call them. UHL, you can call them or send an email. So again, there's different ways to communicate with the underwriters, but just knowing how to do that, once you've identified your market and your product, because your market is going to tell you what products you need, and your product, of course, will direct you to the carrier. If you're doing mortgage protection, then you know that you're going to utilize either Rural Neighbors or Transamerica or Americo. You decide which one, and then from there, which carrier information that you need to use. Utilizing the supplemental forms, I covered that quite a bit. Again, that's helping you paint the picture. That's helping you gather that additional information. That's where spending that extra 15 to 20 minutes with the client is going to save you anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks on getting paid. Because again, if it's stuck in underwriting because they need additional information, or because they want to request an APS, or whatever the case may be, a lot of that could be avoided by simply utilizing the forms, directing them accordingly, and of course following up on your pending. Also, one of the things that we have available, Agent Mentor. We have a phenomenal resource there, by the name of Holly. She just great experience in the market, great direction, very personable. You're always going to be able to get some help in contact with her. So she's going to help you direct your client. So if you run into those particular cases where you're not sure what to do, or you need some help, or you're in the home with the client, I always tell agents, don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't feel like just because you're new, the client's going to look, down or doubt you or anything like that. It's actually just the opposite. They're going to have more faith and go, wow, this person has a whole team they can call. They have a product specialist they can call. So I tell agents, that's a great question, Mr. Client. Let me call a product specialist. Pick up the phone and make a phone call. And you can kind of recap what you're doing. I'm sitting here with so-and-so. This is what they were looking for. We've kind of gone into some of these options. This is maybe the medical challenge that we're running into, or just whatever the case may be. And a lot of times the client just hearing, what you're going through, how you're working, to meet their need and meet their budget, they'll hear that. And, oh, you know what? Okay, I'm just going to get this done. Or maybe we can give you something or say something that can help you turn it, or maybe make a recommendation that you just didn't think of. So again, use your agent mentor, use your product team. A lot of times also, you can call the carriers directly, if it's during hours, and you'll get help there. They'll answer your questions, they'll email you forms, they'll do things, just as well. So you always have support lines, and, again, submit new business properly. I'm going to show you that here shortly. Final expense, real quick, just underwriting. The app is the map. In final expense, in most cases, the app will tell you what the client qualifies for. If you answer yes in here, the client does not qualify for this, submit the application as this. And so, again, the app is the map. In mortgage protection, you're going to use your underwriting guides a lot more. You're going to use your prescription guides, and you're going to do a lot more risk assessments. You do very little risk assessments in final expense. In most cases, again, the app's going to tell you what they qualify for. But mortgage protection, again, you're going to be looking through your underwriting guides quite often. You're going to look through your prescription guides. Eventually, you'll become familiar with this stuff. You'll become familiar with what questions to ask, and you're going to do a lot of risk assessments. In the IUL market, again, same thing, utilizing your underwriting guides, your prescription guides, your risk assessments, but also proposals. A great place to get those. What I do, I gather the client's information, as far as what they're looking for, their goals, their objectives, if they, looking for lifetime income, if they're looking for mainly living benefits, if they're looking for the IUL product mainly for cash value as opposed to the life coverage, then I gather that information, how much is in their budget, and I send that over to the National Life. And I say, hey, send me over a proposal for this, and they'll send over a proposal right away, and for a few different options, and then from there, I'll go to the software on the website, and I'll try and match it. Again, just a little training for myself. So I'll match the proposal, and then that way I can run it myself, and if I need some more help, I can always contact them and get that additional help. So again, it's a great way to learn how to run your proposals. Of course, you can always submit them, with us. We're going to do that, exactly that. We're going to contact National Life, get that information, and present it to you. And, you can even, in some of the IUL training, we have kind of going over some of the proposals a little bit briefly. Now, putting those together again, you're going to utilize the carrier as a great resource for that, because you want to make sure and get, a good solid proposal together. This is the, I talk about submitting business properly. Just briefly, this is the new business cover sheet. You want to make sure and have this. This is accessible in the back office of the website. You want to utilize this when you submit business to the home office. Here soon, you're going to be able to submit business in the back office of the website. Right now, you can either scan it and email it, or you can fax it in. Either way, of course, you can bring it up to the office. Basically, what we're going to do, we're going to go over everything. We're going to go over all the application, make sure everything's in good order, and we're going to make sure it stays in jet issue status. So, utilize the tools and the resources. We want to help you get paid quickly. We want to help the client get covered right away. It's a benefit to everyone. The client has that security, again, of knowing their family's protected in time of need. So with that, let's giddy up. We'll take a short break before we get back and get started. But if you do have any questions, for those of you that are online, you can always send me an email, or you can give us a call at the office. Email Jason at summitallianceadvantage.com.